Hey there, Smoke Master D coming at you with another episode of Barbecue Buyer's Guide, the show in which I do a comparative analysis for barbecue related equipment. And this time we're looking at next generation wireless thermometer probes. And here you'll see chapter times for this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Stick around to the end and learn which probe I purchased myself and why. Now, what do I mean by next generation probe? Meter, notably, has just come out with its second generation, but Combustion Inc. has only come out with its first generation, and I've still included them here. I've included probes that have recently come out that aim to be more accurate in their temperature readings, display and share more cooking data, have longer battery times, withstand higher temperatures, and have better connectivity than previous wireless probes in the market. Please forgive me if I didn't include a probe you think I should have. I didn't include the Temp spike, and I'm sure that there are others. The ones I did include I felt like best deserved this designation, but maybe I missed a deserving probe. So my apologies. And as always, I'll be listing them from the lowest base price to the highest. So let's start off. Here we have the Meatstick 4 with extender for $124.99. They do sell the Meatstick 4 without the extender for almost $95, but I decided not to include it because the extender is needed to make the probe fit the requirements of this episode. The Meatstick 4-pack with Wi-Fi is $454.98. Now, the Meter Pro comes in at $129.95. The Duo version, which has two, is $199.95. The Meter Pro XL is $349.95. Fireboard Labs has come out with the Fireboard Pulse for $149 per pulse. It connects to the Fireboard 2, which is sold separately for $199. There are two other models, the Drive and Pro, which are $259 and $319 respectively. The S1G antenna for $19 will extend the Bluetooth range, but if your Fireboard 2 is within Wi-Fi range, the antenna is unnecessary. Should also be noted that these probes will pair with grills and smokers that already use the Fireboard system, like Yoder smokers and Lone Star grills. Thermoworks has their RFX probe starter kit for $159. Two probes and a two-probe kit is $239, and the four-probe kit is $349. The Typher Sync Gold Duo is $179, and the Quad is $299. It should be noted that there is a previous non-gold generation of these probe systems that came out fairly recently before the gold and are a little bit cheaper. The prices shown here are listed as sale prices, so the price you see when you watch this may be higher, but I have to go with the price I have right now. Combustion Inc. has their Predictive Thermometer with their range extending booster on sale right now for $179. They sell their thermometer without the base, but again, we're focusing on the next generation and best performing iterations of equipment. The base extends Bluetooth range. A range extending display is available for $69 right now. There's also a pack of two predictive thermometers with bases and a display for $349. You can get the display to also be an extra extender for a relay style extending of signal for an extra $50 on top of that for $399. When we talk about Bluetooth range, we'll go over some of these things. Those were all the probes. Now let's see what they look like in a graph. So here we see all of them rounded to the nearest whole dollar. I put the Fireboard Pulse on there for 2 and 4 probes, just so you can see where it would land. And 4 probes goes so high that you don't even see that number up at the top, which is $596. The single probes are basically in the order that I presented the companies. Typher, interestingly, has the cheapest set of 2, then Meter, then Thermoworks, the Fireboard, then Combustion Inc. Typher also is the cheapest set of 4, then Meter, then Meatstick, and then the Fireboard Pulse. When we break the price down per probe, we see that the same trends work out. The Typher Quad is the cheapest, then the Thermoworks, then Meter, and then Meatstick for the sets of 4. Typher comes in at the cheapest again for sets of 2, then Meter, then Thermoworks, and lastly, Combustion Inc., which has both of the 2 last spots. Arguably, the Fireboard Pulse would take the last spot if you added in the cost it would take to include signal boosting, but haven't done that here. For single probes, it's the Meatstick, Meter, Thermoworks, and then Combustion Inc. Now, one thing I should address here is an issue that has been discussed a lot recently, which is the inaccuracy of the ambient sensors at the butt ends of these probes. Thermoworks has made a lot of this and explains that this inaccuracy is caused by heat energy conducting from the ambient side of the stick into the cold meat side of the stick where the tip is, right? So that coldness there is sort of pulling the heat through the stick, skewing the reading on the ambient side. Also, the meat will begin to push out water as the muscle strands contract, right? It pushes out the water and creates this evaporative cooling zone around the meat, which is cooler than the temperature of the grill or the smoker chamber as a whole. So both of these phenomena will make the ambient temperature read lower than the chamber actually is, which may lead some people to scald or burn their meat. I have to say, I've used the Meter block, which is a first generation wireless probe, for a very long time now, and I don't think these phenomena have led me to burn anything because of it. Could they have affected my cook in some other way? Maybe I was cooking a lot hotter at the beginning of my cook than I would have. One recent trend of smoking is emulating a barbecue's method for smoking a brisket, in which you cold smoke the brisket at 180 degrees for the first several hours. This method could be greatly thrown off by these ambient sensor flaws. On the other hand, I've turned out some great barbecue with my Meter block, and after this stall, meaning after about 160 degrees of internal temperature, these phenomena are not an issue anymore. And that's because, the meat's heated up, so it's not pulling that temperature through the stick quite as much anymore. And, all the water about is pushed out. So the evaporative cooling stops, right? So about after that, it's pretty much normal. And the ambient temperature sensor works. Now, if you're cooking something like a steak to a lower temperature, like medium rare, you might not ever get past these problems, and they may greatly affect what you're doing. Let's see what these manufacturers are doing about this. There's not a whole lot of evidence that Meatstick or Meter are doing much about it. Thermoworks includes a wired ambient probe, and their wireless probes have no ambient temperature sensor. The Fireboard Pulse has an ambient sensor with a ring design. Does that help? I have no idea, but it is intriguing and it does look promising. The Typher and Combustion Inc. also don't appear to have done anything about the phenomena described previously. Please note, however, that some of these manufacturers may have overcome these issues by having a longer shaft away from the meat or non-conductive materials in the body of their probe. So we really can't tell. Moving on. Here are the upper ratings of the ambient temperature sensors. 572 degrees Fahrenheit is that upper limit for Thermoworks, Meatstick, and the Fireboard Pulse thermometers that have colors on them. I assume that the color would bubble off if the temperature was taken to the ambient high of the non-colored stainless steel pulse, which is 662 degrees. The Combustion Inc tops out at 600, the Typher at 932, and the Meter Pro at 1000 degrees. Here we have the number of internal temperature sensors. The Fireboard Pulse doesn't seem to indicate that it has more than one. I put in a screenshot where it clearly says the internal sensor, and it uses the singular there. It's not plural, right? Meatstick has 3, Thermoworks has 4, Meter and Typher have 5, Combustion Inc has 8, but one or more of these may actually be ambient temperature sensors. Now, for battery life, Pulse, Meter Pro, and Combustion Inc have 24 hours of battery. The Typher has 50 hours, the Thermoworks has 60, and the Meatstick has a whopping 70 hours. Next, we ask, how long does this take to fully charge? The Pulse takes 10 minutes, the Thermoworks 20 minutes, the Combustion Inc 25 minutes, the Meter Pro 30 minutes, and the Meatstick somewhere around 120 minutes or more. The Typher website didn't explain how long it would take to fully charge, only that 2 minutes would get you 2 hours. Does that mean 50 minutes would get you to the full charge of 50 hours? Right now, I'm just speculating on that. And now we get to probe diameter, which is important because this will determine the size of the hole in your meat and whether or not you can get the probe into some of your thinner cuts, like fish. The Fireboard Pulse is the thinnest at 4.75 millimeters. The Combustion Inc is next at 4.8. The Meter Pro comes in at 5. The Typher, 5.4. The Thermoworks at 5.59. And the Meatstick, 4, is the thickest at 6 millimeters, which may explain its long battery life. Now we will discuss signal range, which is one of the most complex aspects of these probes. Meter only connects to Wi-Fi, and only to a 2.4 gigahertz network. In fact, all of these systems require or recommend the 2.4 gigahertz network because it reaches further than the 5 gigahertz. I had to set up a special guest network in order to connect to my first generation meter. Also about Meter, my block would only connect and relay with Wi-Fi. If I tried to use Bluetooth, my phone would connect directly to the probes, and I wouldn't have any range at all. Try to use the meter block at the lake, and I found this incredibly inconvenient. I basically had to hold my phone like a few inches from my pit barrel cooker just to get a temperature reading. At home, of course, it wasn't an issue because I had Wi-Fi. In fact, if you have Wi-Fi connection, you can generally monitor these probes. By these probes, I mean like all of the probes I'm talking about today. You can monitor them like anywhere you're connected to the internet. But this slide is about Bluetooth. So let's start with the Fireboard Pulse, which has the lowest range, meaning 30 feet obstructed. And by obstructed, I mean if your grill is outside and you've gone like inside your house, right? And 250 feet unobstructed, right? So if you're just like in a field, you can go like 250 feet and you'll be fine. Now, on their website, they explain these are minimum numbers, and the actual numbers can be higher than this. And you can see the chart there on your screen. One thing that's not entirely clear is whether this range is for the Pulse connecting to a smartphone without a Fireboard 2 controller or with. The website says that you can connect without the controller, but then the term obstructed would include being inside an enclosed grill or smoker. I'm not sure whether the Fireboard 2 controller can actually work as a repeater and increase the Bluetooth range like it does with the antenna that we're going to talk about in a second, and how it does through Wi-Fi. So going on, Combustion Inc. reported the second worst range at 50 feet obstructed and 330 feet unobstructed. For the Meatstick 4, it's 164 obstructed and 650 feet unobstructed. And here we have Combustion Inc. again, and their most expensive unit, wherein the bases are extenders and the display is also a signal extender. You can actually set up relays around obstacles with these extenders to get up to 1,000 feet of range, which may seem like a little bit of work, but maybe it's worth it. And now we're back to the Fireboard Pulse. When you add the S1G antenna to the Fireboard 2, it will increase the range to 150 obstructed as a minimum. Again, remember the chart. And 1,400 feet unobstructed as a minimum. Then we have Thermoworks, which is a very different animal altogether. It uses what they call patent-pending sub-gigahertz RFX wireless technology. The crazy part is that these numbers are actually the probe to the RFX gateway, which itself connects to Wi-Fi, and soon, or so the company claims, to your cell phone's Bluetooth too. The true range of the Thermoworks RFX could be closer to or greater than possibly the Typher Sync Gold, right? Which you see at the very top end there at 3,000 and lower at 700. So, they didn't mention Thermoworks what the range is of the gateway itself with Bluetooth coming out from it, which could, make it that you could be further away and receive Bluetooth signal. The Typher Sync Gold, on the other hand, uses a sub 1G connection to connect to its base at 700 feet obstructed or 3,000 feet unobstructed. And the base shows the temperature, right? It has a temperature reading and will connect through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to your smartphone. How similar, I was asking myself, is this sub 1G connection to the Thermoworks patent-pending sub-gigahertz RFX wireless technology? I'm not sure, but they sound similar. And now, we'll talk about the apps, which are a fundamental part of the experience of using a wireless probe. Only the Typher, and with the added accessory to the Combustion Inc, are you allowed to read temperatures without a smartphone or secondary device, and they still have apps and programming. Now, I've only used the meter app, which I found to be generally useful. To help give you a more rounded view on the performance of these apps, I had ChatGPT summarize some of the pros and cons from user reviews of these apps. I don't have time to read thousands of reviews, so that's what I did. Some of the cons may have been fixed by the time you get your wireless probe, but these are things that you might see while using these apps. So here we go. Some pros for the Meatstick 4. They say that it's straightforward, with a straightforward interface. Real-time temperature tracking is good. Intuitive design and visual aids has good alerts. Cons, the initial setup and probe pairing can be difficult, and it requires you, so they say, to give your location data to Meatstick. Meter Pro, for pros, has clear instructions, is visually appealing graphs, and has timely temperature alerts. The cons, it has some connectivity issues, sometimes inaccurate cooking time estimates as it updates. The Thermoworks app, the pros, detailed temperature graphs, real-time alerts, and the ability to save session data. Some cons, the interface is not the best, a little clunky, connectivity issues with setup. And now, the Fireboard. Pros, detailed data logging for analyzing past cooks, voice assistant integration, detailed temperature tracking, graphing capabilities, and the ability to set custom alerts. Some cons, some people said that there were layout issues and not enough customization options. Now for the Typher, Pros: it's intuitive and user-friendly. It has good recipe transfer, customizations, and notification of cooking stages. The cons: occasionally glitches or crashes, limited features for customization and history. For Combustion Inc., the pros: advanced temp tracking and prediction, ease of use for advanced features, reliable alerts, and notifications. The cons is the complexity for casual users. If you want more information on these apps, seek out individual reviews, which is always a good idea to do in addition to using Barbecue Buyer's Guide. The very last consideration we're going to take is that 2 of these wireless probes can integrate with fans for controlling grill temperatures. The Thermoworks Billows retails for $79, and the Fireboard Drive Blower retails for $69. And now, for my thoughts. I thought I would get the next generation of the meter because my experience with the meter block was generally good. One of my probes on my meter block broke. And then when everything came out about the ambient temperatures being inaccurate, I started having second thoughts. That being said, 1,000 degrees on the upper limit is impressive, if you do very high heat cooking. And the app is pretty good. So that's what I have to say about the Meter Pro. The Meatstick has a really long battery life, but I don't really find it particularly appealing in any other way. The Combustion Inc. seems to make a lot out of its predictive cooking times. And I know that people who really want to get the temperature of a cook exactly right, like cooking the perfect steak, I think that they found Combustion Inc. to be very useful. So if that's you and you like cooking steaks and really lean meat that you don't cook low and slow to very high temperatures, Combustion Inc. could be right for you. Thermoworks, on the other hand, is one of the most trusted names in instant read thermometers. The range is really impressive, but a wireless thermometer that has a wired ambient probe is a big turnoff for me. Granted, 1 wire is better than 5, but it still seems like it's against the idea and ethos of what wireless probe systems should be. Typher seems like a really great system. Now, I'm not sure how reliable the ambient temperature readings will be, but everything else seems spot on. Price, it had the best price for 4 probes. Distance range is, the highest, so it seems. Temperature range is pretty high, not 1,000 degrees, but still rather up there. Battery life being, also really good too. The 2 things the Fireboard Pulse has that Typher Sync Gold does not are the ability to run a draft fan, which I want to try on my El Patron and maybe on my Char Griller 980. Just using, maybe not the draft fan, but using the Fireboard 2. And also there's the greater chance that the ambient temperature sensor will be accurate. That's my hope anyway. The probe diameter is also the best, and 24-hour battery life is way more than I need. And it charges in 10 minutes. So, if you go through those 24 hours, it's not a big deal. Here are a lot of good things about the app too. And that is why I will be receiving soon 2 of these Fireboard Pulse probes to try out soon. Now, Thermoworks might have been in the running for me. It sure is cheaper after all, except for that wired ambient sensor thing. When Big Phil sent me a free offset smoker to review, and I decided that it would be the offset smoker that I use, I asked him for a probe port, and he didn't include it. Now, I know I could sacrifice the analog temperature gauges port, but I really don't want to do that. And closing that wire in a 1/4-inch steel door just doesn't seem like a good idea either. And I was already, looking for draft fans and, so everything sort of just came together for me for this, using the Pulse. I hope it turns out well. Hopefully I'll get a review out at some point. I can tell you what my experience is with it. Well, those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Which of these do you prefer and why? Feel free to tell me down in the comments. Of course, if you own these wireless probes, leave your own review in the comments as well. I hope you appreciated this show. Maybe it helped you decide which way you want to go. And as always, go get your smoke on, y'all.